All right. Well, hey, welcome to episode 2 of Super Secret HQ. This time with hopefully 50 to 75% less likes. We got the note in the feedback. So we are going to do our best not to use the word like as much, especially me. I was like a like machine. And there you go. I did it again. But back again, I'm Josh Lagern, and I'm joined, as always, by Evan Swords to discuss things going on in the fandom world, especially as it relates to Marvel, DC, Star Wars, you name it. We will cover it in some fashion. So, Evan, how's your week, man? How are things going?
Things are going well, man. It's a good week for nerddom and content. There's a lot of shows on. Obviously some big movies just came out. I am enjoying all of it. I feel like we have like every single facet right now. You have like sci-fi with Severance. You have like comic book stuff with Spider-Man animated series, like MCU, obviously with the movie that just came out, Captain America. So it's a good time right now.
This is totally off topic, but do you guys watch White Lotus? That just came out too.
I did. It was a little
Yeah.
underwhelming, but I know it's the
Yeah.
first episode, so I have faith. I
Yep.
love that cast already, and yeah, I like the first two seasons for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's going to be interesting. Severance is really good this season. Lots of really great stuff. Maybe we should do an episode, even though it's a little off topic, on like premium TV, like because The Last of Us is going to come out as well. Oh well, that kind of actually falls in our ballpark. Last of Us comes out in April, so
Very
we
excited
can
for that.
we can definitely talk about The Last of Us. But today we're going to be staying on the train of the MCU and talking about reviews for Brave New World. We're also going to discuss some of the future things that we didn't get to in our last episode about the MCU. So, without further ado, we'll cut right to the chase and start talking about Captain America Brave New World. Evan and I both saw it, and we both really liked it. So, Evan, do you want to go first and talk about why you liked Captain America Brave New World?
Yeah, I feel like this like should be a psychology class. Like I think we should look back on this whole circumstance and really look at it from like really a psychology standpoint of how the reviews of this movie critically have been so bad, yet it has been so well received amongst fans. I have a lot of thoughts, and obviously we'll get into it, but like it's crazy to see how critical these professional critics were of this movie. Like going into the movie, I had like the same feeling in my gut that I think a lot of MCU fans have had recently, where it's like, okay, I'll go in with low expectations and hopefully I at least have fun, right? And like, I don't know when like the exact moment was, but I went from like cautiously optimistic to like, wait a second, this is a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yep.
I guess before we just dive into that, what was your just general, feel of it watching it?
Yeah, well, I was like you. I had a lot of feelings of like, I don't know what this is going to be like, man. I mean, it's like the film, from what I could tell, was entirely reshot. And look, there's elements of that you can tell. There were some reshoots that happened. And I mean, we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, I had the same feeling. I walked in, expectations were very tempered by all of that. And then, partway through the movie, my thought was like, how could you not like this movie? Like, Anthony Mackie is awesome as Captain America. Harrison Ford is great as President Ross. And I just felt like there was so much for people to grab onto with this film and enjoy. So much about it. I mean, even elements that I had basement expectations for. Um, Giancarlo Esposito, for example, was great in the movie. Had no complaints. Actually, would love to see him again in a future Captain America movie, as the leader of the Serpent Society. So, yeah, overall, really liked it. Like you, I had low expectations, but walked out of it pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, let me run through my thoughts because I did have a lot. So, I mean, first and foremost, the big theme for this movie was, in my opinion, being compared to perfect movies, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think
Mm-hmm.
I think there were so many choices in this movie that teetered on the line of, oh, that's an homage to The Winter Soldier or to Civil
Mm-hmm.
War. Some of them were so similar that maybe it could have been considered lazy writing. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
I'm going that route, but I could see how, if you're being a professional critic and you're really trying to be highly critical, I could see
Yep.
how you'd go, okay, well, a lot of these things that happen in this movie, the exact type of thing happened in that. Like, just for example, right? Like Captain America and his sidekick coming into a dark underground bunker that is like an unknown military installation to come find out that a big scientist has created blah blah blah. It was like the same thing from Civil War when they're going in there to turn off all those Winter Soldiers just to find Baron Zemo. That it
Yep.
was with the leader, right? Where it was
Yep.
like you're in this military bunker that no one's supposed to know about. You're going in, you're quiet, it's just two guys, and all of a sudden they realize that they get, like ambushed or they knew it was a trap. So I'm like seeing that, I'm like, okay, that's very similar to some Civil War, like the themes in it, the color, the type of room, the military, like all of that's almost too similar. But at the same time, it worked. I thought the leader worked. I thought the leader
Mm-hmm.
was like everyone was so upset about like the leader's like look and appearance because it wasn't the
Yep.
one we all thought it was. They did have an iteration where he had like bubbly green skin. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
like it. I didn't like it, but like I didn't have an issue with it. I mean, like he's a deformed weird head regardless that's what it was. But
Mm-hmm.
I thought it made a lot of sense for Thaddeus Ross and the Red Hulk to like I just thought the whole story, I guess should we say spoilers here?
Yeah, full spoilers. If you
Right.
haven't
I
seen
don't know.
Captain America Brave New World, stop the podcast, go watch it. Like before
But
you continue with anything else.
I saw a lot of complaints about like, well, it was just a an Incredible Hulk sequel, and it was like, okay, unless you're really like not involved, you should know at this point that Universal has made it nearly impossible to just make a standalone Hulk movie. So,
Yep.
one, are you complaining about getting more Hulk movie? Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is your argument, hey, I only wanted a Captain America movie? First
Yep.
off, you're lying. You just
Yep.
got this version of Captain America. Half of the people probably didn't even watch the TV show Captain America and Winter Soldier, which was really good, by the way. So,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't understand, like, being that critical of it. And so,
Yep.
watching the movie, I'm like, the action is really good, but again, like
Mm-hmm.
comparing to these older movies, when you think of Winter Soldier and you think of the hand-to-hand combat between Chris Evans and Sebastian Stan as the Winter Soldier in Captain America, it's like
Mm-hmm.
iconic, right? The knife
Mm-hmm.
flip, like the behind-the-scenes videos that we've seen a million times of them like drilling down these movements perfectly. They worked so hard on that choreography and it showed. It looked amazing.
Yep.
The choreography in this was really good, but it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't as good as Winter Soldier. So
Yep.
if you're comparing it to that, maybe you go, "Oh man, this fighting doesn't look nearly as good." It's like, sure, but you're again, Winter Soldier is a 10 out of 10 perfect movie. It is
Yep.
made incredibly perfect across the board. I have no complaints for that movie, period. And I don't think it's a fair comparison, especially when you consider how bad Marvel movies have been lately. For
Yep.
us to
Yep.
come in and get, again, I was very hesitant about Anthony Mackie as Captain America, like not because of the story, right? The story comes from the comics. Sam Wilson
Mm-hmm.
becoming Cap is very normal. Like that is a very popular story. I have no issue with that. I just wasn't sure. Excuse me. Anthony Mackie becoming Cap in the MCU. In off scene. He's like he jokes around a lot. He's like a fun
Mm-hmm.
loving guy. He's very social. Like I don't know if I was there. And then I'm watching this movie and he's incredible. Like
Oh
he
yeah, he's
thoroughly really was great.
easily the best part of the movie is Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson, Captain America.
He's captivating. He very clearly earns the role. Like within the story, like you feel like no, he earned Captain America. And I
Yeah.
think in the way of like Chris Evans portrayed Captain America as a man, a man out of time, a man from a different, era that will
Mm-hmm.
just do the right thing no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
That was his version of Cap, and I love that version, and it was great. And I love that Anthony Mackie's version of Cap was not, I'm gonna, just be another iteration of that. It was, I have to be who I am
Yep.
in spite of what everybody thinks, and I
Mm-hmm.
have to be a leader and do the thing that I need to do and be the best version of myself so
Yep.
that I can be the leader that people want me to be. And it's not about having a super soldier serum. And as corny as all that is, like, it just, he portrayed it very well. And I liked it. I believed it. I was rooting for him. It made me come out of it rooting for Anthony Mackie, the person, because I'm
Yep.
like, what a tall feat. What a
Yep.
huge thing to have to accomplish. It's like
Yep.
climbing Mount Everest, and you did it. And so, not to ramble,
100%.
I'll tie it a little bit back here. I really liked the story. I didn't think the story was out of place. I thought weaving in the Incredible Hulk story stuff made sense.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the action. It could have been better, but if it was better, it would have been perfect. So I'm not going to knock it on that. Harrison Ford, I know you'll talk about that. Just
Yep.
Harrison Ford did such a good job there and really brought a level of just heart to a character I was never expecting it to come from.
Yep.
The one thing I will say, my God, the only thing that took me out of the movie is how
Yep.
god awful that forced, like, Israeli propaganda, like, character Sabra got
Mm-hmm.
forced in the movie. Those who are not aware, Sabra is a very controversial character because,
She's a Mossad agent in the actual comic book.
right. And obviously
Yeah.
there's a lot going on right now that's separate of comics, but like,
Mm-hmm.
this was very clearly, like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I just don't think like that. But as someone who tries to be very logical at all times, I'm watching this movie and this girl, listen, Scarlett Johansson was probably like 130 pounds
Mm-hmm.
as the
Mm-hmm.
Black Widow. Not exactly like a big hulking person, but it was believable. This
She's more built for it.
The girl that played this, essentially this new Black Widow, who was trained in the same red room that Black Widow was trained in, was
Mm-hmm.
literally probably shorter than 5 feet tall and
Mm-hmm.
guaranteed did not weigh more than 100 pounds. Now
Yeah.
she has an acting background. I'm sure she's a great actor,
Mm-hmm.
but to put like to essentially force Israeli propaganda into this movie so obviously, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
she wasn't a good actor in the movie. Her role made no sense. Her lines were stale. Everything she did was like terrible. And
Mm-hmm.
on top of that, they tried to make her so important when it wasn't necessary. Having a sub 100-pound person, man or woman,
Yep.
literally physically in the movie throwing a 200-pound person, it's
Mm-hmm.
like this is a comic book movie. We suspend belief all the time, but even I was looking at like that, like, was like, what am I watching? Like, why are they forcing this? You know what made me so mad? Imagine that movie, but Sharon Carter
Yeah.
played that role.
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
How much better would it have been?
Yeah, yeah. Or, I mean, so here's the thing. I don't have as much of an issue with her being Israeli as you do.
Oh, I don't have an
That
issue
being,
with her being Israeli.
yeah, yeah,
Obviously,
yeah.
I don't want to come across that way.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
had
yeah,
an
yeah.
issue with it just being so forced. Like, it felt like
Yeah.
forced propaganda.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But even if they went, there are Israeli actresses who could have done that role. Like Gal Gadot's never played anybody in the MCU or in the before. She could have done that
Would
role,
have been great.
and would have been way more believable in that
And
role
Gal
than
Gadot is not known for being a good actress.
no, no.
Like, she
And
gets torched online all the time, and I
yeah,
still think she would have done a much better job.
she would have been more physical in that role. But you're right. Like Sharon Carter could have been the character that they would have inserted, and there would have been like a suspense element because of the end credit scene that they did in Falcon and the Winter Soldier with Sharon Carter, sort of being alluding to her, being a double agent, maybe. We don't know for sure, and hopefully we'll get to see that someday. But was it the Serpent Society that she was a part of? Was that what they
No,
alluded
no,
to
no,
in
no.
that
She
end
was
credits?
what was it like? Well, either way, so yeah, the show ended with her being like, God, I'm trying to think of what it was. I think she, here's the thing. I thought she was going to be in this movie, and it ended up
Yep.
not being it. But like,
Yep.
I'm trying to think of what is it like? What is the name of it? Like the dealer or the power broker? Sorry,
Power broker, that's
God,
right.
I'm
Oh
gonna
yeah, she
edit
was
that out.
that was a character,
Yeah,
secret character through the show, and then it was revealed to be Sharon Carter.
which also was terrible writing, and I understand them not wanting to do that. But like, yeah,
Yeah.
either way, any choice with that character, and again,
Yeah.
it could have been a member of the IDF Israeli military, and I would have still thought it was a little forced. But like,
Yeah.
had you just
Yeah.
picked someone that was actually a competent actor and didn't, I mean, literally was less than 100 pounds, like
Yeah.
I
No,
would have been
that
like, okay,
that element took me out of it as well. Just she was not physically, and I actually looked it up because I was like, what, she's like very small, and found out that she has some sort of muscular development issue from when she was a kid.
from when she was
Um,
born,
yeah, yeah,
she
from when
has.
she was born. But so it's like, is that the right person to put in a role like that? I understand like wanting to kind of expand out the availability of things for that, but and she
Let me
was,
just like let me preface this. I cannot
yeah,
stress this enough because I think it's very safe to say anyone that knows the two of us. I mean, again, I will recognize that it is not exactly like right now is not the right time for two white guys to be talking about a woman's body
exactly.
size, weight, and all the
Yep,
above. I don't
yep,
want it to come across that because it sounds like that. Just listening to
yeah,
us talk, like if you didn't know us, it would sound like that. And I can't stress it enough. That's not what I'm
yep,
trying to accomplish. Like
mm-hmm,
just it is my issue of how forced it felt. I have
yeah,
no issue with her as a person, as an actor.
yep,
I have no issue with her background being Israeli. That has nothing to do with it.
yeah,
It is watching the movie. It felt like the powers that be, whether it's the IDF or whoever, wanted to have representation in this movie, which by the way had no other ties to Israel at all. There
mm-hmm,
was
mm-hmm,
nothing about this movie that had any ties, or even in the MCU, really, that has any ties to Israel. But it's just felt
mm-hmm,
like they wanted a representation of Israel and the IDF in the MCU. And they were
mm-hmm.
like, oh, let's just put her here. She'll be the special envoy to the president of the United States, and no one's going to ask questions about it.
Yeah,
So, again, I understand it's a very sensitive topic and there's a lot that
yep,
goes into it, but that is not my intention.
yep.
It felt like the one part of the movie that was very not forced.
And you want to talk about putting fuel on the fire of for conspiracy theorists, like
Yeah.
making the head of the president's security a former IDF Israeli person is really, they're gonna have a field day with that one.
I mean, yeah, and it's like even in the comics, Sabra is not a popular or like consistently used character,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And like
Mm-hmm.
even the name Sabra has some pretty nasty background and stories to some extent. So like
Mm-hmm.
it also means resilience and strength and all the above. I get it, but like yeah,
Yeah.
it seemed like a move that was not worth what us all people like us talking about it. But yeah, again, I
Yeah.
don't mean to
Yeah.
rant.
Yeah, so I'll just move into my thoughts about the movie just overall. I wrote a review of the film you can find on our X feed. I wrote it on Substack. So, yeah, the thing that I thought made this movie great was the performance by Anthony Mackie. I 100% agree with you there. Anthony Mackie lives in this role. He's played Sam Wilson now for the last 11 from 2014 in The Winter Soldier, which a lot of the things that you mentioned that were kind of rehashes were also rehashes of The Winter Soldier. They've done this now for three movies in a row, like The Dark Lab, the mysterious villain, all of that stuff. They've done this now for three films in a row. So the Anthony Mackie, terrific. Harrison Ford, terrific. I'm so glad. Obviously, he's picking up from William Hurt, and there's a lot to be said about what they did, what the filmmakers did with Harrison Ford, which is they, knowing that William Hurt could not play this character, they gave Harrison Ford a arc where he could believably inhabit the role and make the role his own, because Harrison Ford's version of Thunderbolt Ross is on a redemption tour. So he's a changed man, and they keep bringing that up in the movie. And I thought that was really smart because it allowed Harrison Ford to play the role himself and not try and do an impression of William Hurt's Thunderbolt Ross, which was really smart. The things that don't, and then all the stuff, like all the action stuff in this movie works. The Top Gun scene at the Celestial base works really well. In fact, the thought that I had about that scene was that had Kevin Feige been more involved, you know how Kevin Feige always brings up, this movie is this. Like, this is what we're doing with this. Like I said, Spider-Man Homecoming is like Back to the Future meets, whatever. Like that's what Kevin Feige does. I have a feeling if Feige was more involved with Captain America Brave New World, he would have probably said, it's our Top Gun. Like, that's what we're going for here. And that's what that jet fighter scene near the Celestial Island was really giving me. It was like, oh, this is Captain America meets Top Gun, and it's kind of got this great vibe, down to his buddy gets injured and is, again, spoiler alert, but the new Falcon, Joaquin Torres, gets injured, much, alluding to like Goose. And it sets up a great moment with Bucky that I think was probably added later as well. The things that didn't work for me in this film are the way that I've described this movie is it feels like a really good movie was laid over the top of a really terrible movie. And there are peaks in the film. I can't recall exactly when they were, but there were a couple of scenes in the movie that I was watching where I listened to the dialogue or whatever, and I was like, oh wow, this is, they were clearly, this was clearly part of the original cut, and I can see why they decided to reshoot a lot of this movie.
Well, no, hold on now. They didn't. I
Oh,
don't know
they
if you,
didn't reshoot.
they
Oh, they did
they so
shoot a
they
lot of the movie.
apparently I again this is this like a lot of information came out and they're like, a lot of people have been talking about how there was huge reshoots, but
Yeah,
apparently there was not. There was one reshoot and it was pretty standard to how movies were done. But I do agree
interesting.
it felt like a lot of layers on top of a lot of
Yeah,
layers, things like that.
yeah, there were some things that they clearly, I do know like Giancarlo Esposito's character was added for the reshoots. Like all of those scenes were new because I remember that production, that part of the productions. They added that character in, and I think he's effective. I actually had lowest expectations for that character, and he works really, really well. He's great. He plays one character, but he plays it so well, that like sinister, like guy, and he does it really, really well. So yeah, so I agree with you too, Evan. I feel like there's this expectation that every movie has to be perfect or it sucks. And particularly with Marvel, it's like almost like this movie was not perfect. It was not like Avengers Endgame or Captain America the Winter Soldier, which I agree with you is like one of the greatest MCU movies ever. So therefore it sucks. There is lots of gradation between sucks and the best movie ever. And like like you said, perfect movie versus, a very well made, very good movie. And I think that this movie is a very good, well made movie. The Red Hulk stuff, it's funny because I think it worked great. I really liked the Red Hulk fight scene at the end. If you've seen the trailers, though, you kind of get a gist for how it goes, down to like, Anthony Mackie's line, I should have taken the damn super soldier serum. It works though in the movie. I still laughed at it when he said it in the movie, but yeah, I think that it works overall. But the best part is the interaction, the non-Hulk interaction between Anthony Mackie and Harrison Ford. They have great interaction with each other. For me, the overall theme of this film, which I think you alluded to, was Captain America, Sam Wilson's version of Captain America, being being mere mortal versus Steve Rogers' Captain America being a super soldier. And Captain Steve Rogers, Captain America, being a man out of his time, and Sam being very much a man in his time. And so, a lot of people, and there's a guy named Richard Newberry who does great work. He writes, I forget which publication that he writes for, but he writes for one of the main publications. And he wrote a great article about how, black superheroes are expected to carry these like political burdens that white superheroes aren't expected to. And I found it really insightful because one of the things that people are complaining about, that critics are complaining about, is the film isn't political enough. It doesn't delve into the racial elements of Sam Wilson enough. And to me, it's like that's not necessary because we've already gotten that in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We've already seen that, and I think that it alludes to it enough in the film. Um,
Real quick, I think that would be insane if people actually think that the entire premise of the TV show Falcon and the Winter Soldier
mhm.
was the story of being a black person that is Captain America. And
Yep,
there was a 5 minute speech at the end where he said, this is every single day. I have to try and be this person that people don't want me to be. I
yep.
think I live this every single day. I'm not going to repeat it there. He did such a better job. It would be like
And
a
it's a
dis
great, it's a,
and that's
yeah,
actually one thing that I really liked about this movie is that it didn't do that. I like
no,
that like this movie treated him as if he was Captain America because he
yep,
was Captain
yep.
America. And
Hmm.
there were little things. There was little things, I think, there was little things that I love, like Isaiah Bradley and like his relationship with Sam, right? I loved Isaiah Bradley's, how he talked about his wife and his suit. And there was so many themes in this that it wasn't like a black experience or anything like that, but it was just like let these two characters who are black just be the way they're supposed to be in this movie. It's not about forced tropes or cliches or anything like that. It was just like he is Captain America and he's black. And it doesn't
Yeah,
have
and
to be talked about. It doesn't have to be dragged around. We're not bothered by that because he's too busy roundhouse kicking Russians in the face.
that's right. That's right. And Richard, and I that was Richard's point. And I mean, I don't want to speak for Richard. Like, Richard, if I'm wrong and you're seeing this, please correct me. But the point that Richard was getting to was exactly what you said. Like, we don't need to dwell on that. Like, we need Sam Wilson is Captain America at this point. He is fully embraced being Captain America, and with all that that entails, as a black person in America. And that's how this movie chooses, I think, very wisely to approach that. And so, I haven't seen much of it, but I have gotten a couple of comments from people like, I bet this sucks because it's woke. And I'm like, this movie is not political at all. It has no allusions to politics. And the only way that I could see that being kind of true is that Captain America himself is black. So if you have a problem with Captain America being black, well, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know what to say to you.
I
You're,
mean,
you're
the MCU, Marvel, comic books, these stories are not for you.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But yeah, there were some weird things though when it comes to like you mentioned the Serpent Society. They
Yep.
had characters that were from the comics
Yep.
that I even think of like who's the wrestler that was supposed to be in this?
Gosh, I forget, but I know who you is it. It wasn't John Cena, was it?
No, it was Seth Rollins was supposed to
Okay,
be
yeah.
one of the members of the Serpent Society, one of the like
Uh-huh.
actual members of the comic books, and it really felt like whether it was executives or whoever choice it was, they just stripped everything about the Serpent Society down and just made them like really just like regular mercenaries, which was I think
Yeah.
a boring choice. Like I'm so over like the Winter Soldier did a really good job about being realistic, but like it's time to evolve. Like, give
Yep.
me a little bit of comic book trope. Give me some like colorful costumes and
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't think it was necessary.
I 100% agree with you. And the another thing that I think is really interesting are some of the choices it makes for setups. Because here's the thing, I was think, Secret Wars is coming out. I know it's not the same thing, but I'm more like, for those people who don't know, I Evan, would you say, I don't want to speak for you, but the impression that I get is you're more of a Marvel fan than a DC fan. And I'm more of a DC fan than a Marvel fan, I would say. But I love both, and I know you love both too. But
I'd say
it's
I've read a lot more Marvel comics than I have DC, but
hmm
I think my being a big fan of Marvel, to the point where that might be the case, stems from the MCU just being better recently. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know necessarily that if it was inverse and DC was cranking out better movies throughout this, I think I would probably be, that way. I love both, but Marvel has definitely just been pumping out better content.
totally.
I'm really excited for James Gunn's DC universe.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's been good so far. One of the things that I know, Secret Wars is not the same as Crisis on Infinite Earths, and it didn't have the same effect on the Marvel universe as Crisis on Infinite Earths had on the DC universe. That being said, I was suspecting that Secret Wars would act as sort of a pathway to a soft reboot for the MCU, and it still may. Um, but that being said, they introduced adamantium in this film, which into the MCU proper, which was an interesting choice for me because my assumption was we're going to have Secret Wars and we're going to have sort of a soft relaunch for the MCU with a reconfigured MCU with a little bit of a different history, and the X-Men were always there was my assumption for how they would approach this. But it really does seem like they're setting up for the X-Men to be a part of this franchise, this element of franchise. And it's interesting to me. And I mean, I guess they still could do that because adamantium is being introduced now. That basically erases all of Wolverine's history, or maybe it doesn't. I don't know. You might know better than me, but obviously Weapon X, Wolverine serving with Cap in World War II, all of that's basically off the table by introducing
Right.
adamantium now. I mean, I guess he could use his bone claws or whatever, but did that surprise you that they introduced adamantium in this movie the way that they did?
No, I thought if
Mm-hmm.
you're going to bring it into the universe, that would be an interesting way to do it. I
Mm-hmm.
will say my
Mm-hmm.
opinion is pretty straightforward when it comes to this. If I was choosing, would end this version of the MCU that we know with all of these actors
Mm-hmm.
I would kill it with the Secret Wars movie. Secret
Mm-hmm.
Wars, for anyone that is not familiar, I mean, spoilers obviously, but this is a really
And
old.
we're going to discuss it more in depth
Yeah.
in a little bit, but go ahead.
But Secret Wars is, the original iteration is like the Beyonder is just like, hey, you guys are all going to fight on my planet, Battle World, and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the more recent one was more about like the Beyonder obviously did that again, but like it ended up becoming Doctor Doom was like a god king because he was the only one that he thought could take it. And it was like all these groups and factions had their own part on this planet that he created. Hulk had a land and whatever. And it ended up being like everyone coming together to try and stop Doctor Doom. Now, without saying, without needing to go into it further, if I'm looking at the architecture of the MCU right now, and you see Fantastic Four set in a different universe, and it's just now getting started. They just got rights to Marvel. X-Men just kind of got like teased a little bit, and Deadpool and Wolverine. I don't think you still want Hugh Jackman to be that, but I
No.
think they want him in movies. So I think having movies leading up to Secret Wars is a great way to continue to use Ryan Reynolds, to continue to use Hugh Jackman, to continue to use these characters from the MCU currently. It also fixes the problem we talked about before, where I think Pedro Pascal is way too old to play Mr. Fantastic. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
if I were it, I would expect them to go into Secret Wars and have it be one big final battle, and it ends, and then
Mm-hmm.
whether the Fantastic Four that we know right now gets brought into the whatever new universe that the stories will start over from.
Mm-hmm.
The X-Men will get brought into a new universe that they can start stories from. I
Mm-hmm.
think I think that would be the best approach.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it seems cheap to say, but because of my thought process there, I almost don't care about them bringing up adamantium now because I almost feel like none of it's going to matter.
Mm,
I think this universe is going to end because I don't know that you could really continue the MCU in a way that respects the Fantastic Four, the First Family, and X-Men while also having the Avengers with
hmm.
all this disconnected, disjointed things, right? I think you
Yep.
really need to do a clean reset. And like, listen, I know Anthony Mackie just came Cap, but there's probably 3 or 4 movies coming out still. He's been around for a very long time. So is,
Yep.
Benedict Cumberbatch. So is all of these, MCU characters. Like, it's probably time for their stories to end
Hmm.
again and at the end of this iteration. So
Yep. Yep.
I thought it was cool to see Adamantium finally in the MCU, but it might be just a nothing burger.
A throwaway, which leads me to, so let's transition here because I think this is a good point for us to transition. Overall, we both liked Captain America Brave New World. If you sat through our reviews and were spoiled and you haven't seen the movie yet, go see it. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and Anthony Mackie as Cap is great. He's going to be great as the leader of the Avengers, so go watch it.
Absolutely worth seeing in a theater.
Absolutely, yeah. And I went and saw it on Dolby Atmos. Dolby Vision. It was great. Dolby
Same,
Cinema. Yeah,
same.
it was awesome. So, yeah. So we'll go ahead. So last week we talked about Thunderbolts and the Fantastic Four along with this film, but there are 3 more movies so far left in the this iteration of the MCU. Beyond that, Avengers Doomsday, Spider-Man 4, and Avengers Secret Wars. So I thought rather than talk about something else, I promise DC fans we will have a DC themed show coming up here very soon. Don't worry, we'll talk about DC. Have you seen Creature Commandos yet, Evan?
Yeah, not all of it. I've seen like 80% of the episodes. It's been
Okay,
really,
cool, cool,
really
cool.
fun.
Yeah, fun show. So we'll talk about Creature Commandos so far, the DCU so far, things James Gunn's planning and has a slate. But there's just so much to talk about in the MCU because they've just got more momentum. They've been going longer. So we needed to split this up into 2 episodes. So we'll talk first about Avengers Doomsday. So right now what we know about this movie is Robert Downey Jr. is Doctor Doom, or is he? The Fantastic Four are in the film. We know that Anthony Mackie will be Captain America, and we know that Tom Holland's Spider-Man is in the movie, only because Tom Holland is filming 3 movies at one time. And it has been confirmed that while Spider-Man 4 and Avengers Doomsday are filming, he is also filming Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, and his stunt double will be doing a majority of his actual day-to-day filming, and he'll be recording his lines with voiceover later and then obviously do his scenes when he has time with his mask off. So lots of work for Tom Holland running around crazy. We'll talk a little bit about that, but I wanted to know, we have an idea of what Secret Wars is going to be like, and Evan, I actually do want you to go more in depth about that a little bit later when we talk about Avengers Secret Wars. But I have a theory about what I think Avengers Doomsday is going to be about, based on rumors and things that I've gathered and heard. And while it was in development, while they were figuring out what to do, moving on from the Kang Dynasty, which you can give people a little bit of background on that too if you want, or I can do it. But yeah, what do you think Avengers Doomsday is about?
No, I think I've touched on it already. I think if you're going into a Secret Wars style story, it would make sense, like this most recent iteration, where Doom was the centerpiece and kind of the big bad, but also like the god king emperor that Doom is known to be. It would make sense to have that be him.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, at its core, the idea of Robert Downey Jr. being that, being Doom, I hate it. Want to throw
Mm-hmm.
my head through a wall. Don't
Yep.
like it at all. But if it is that, right, where he just plays this Doom and then the universe resets and we start all over, sure, I guess I'll be okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, again, Pedro Pascal and Robert Downey Jr. grab onto each other and tackle each other through a portal, never to be seen again because the universe ends.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I do think that would make the most sense to have it be. We'll see, I guess, really with Fantastic Four, right? Because if
Yep.
they introduce. I don't think they'll introduce Doom in the movie, considering we've already seen a couple different villains and what that might look like. But
Hmm.
if they bring up, a post-credit scene of like that of Robert Downey Jr.'s Doom, whatever, it might give us a little insight. But it definitely seems like pushing the Secret Wars story with Doom as the centerpiece and all the different characters from the different Sony universes, the Fox universes, everybody coming together to stop him would be a good way to fix the problem that was Jonathan Majors being a piece of shit. I don't know
Yep,
if we're supposed to
yep.
swear on this or not, but
No, that's fine.
Jonathan Majors, who played Kang, was going to be the big bad for this essentially Kang Dynasty movie. And at its core, outside of, Jonathan Majors being a terrible human being, he did a really good job as Kang. And I was excited to see that. But when he
Hmm.
got literally convicted, for assaulting his girlfriend,
Yep.
Marvel was like, well, we, can't do that anymore. So
Hmm.
I know that's a difficult thing to try and navigate, but I think, not to be repeating myself over and over again, but I think if you go, we have to redo this story because Jonathan Majors is gone now, and you go, okay, instead of Kang, we'll just go straight into Secret Wars and we'll reset the universe. I think that's going to be a good win.
Yeah, and like, to be honest, I think that the only reason they used Kang is because Disney didn't own the rights to Doctor Doom yet. So it was, well, that doesn't, well, I
I
guess,
think
I
they might
mean,
have by this point, to be honest with you, because they did.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
recently.
And I'm thinking about it because Kang is a Fantastic Four villain too, right? Like, he comes from Fantastic Four villain. So maybe it didn't matter. Maybe they had other reasons for using Kang instead of Doom. Maybe they wanted to reveal Doom as a big reveal at the end of Kang Dynasty when that's what the Avengers was. But yeah, it's really interesting. So I have a theory about this film, and there was a rumor going around before they announced Doomsday that the title for Avengers, when they were kind of reconfiguring it from being the Kang Dynasty, was going to be Avengers versus X-Men. And obviously, there's an Avengers versus X-Men comic, and we're all familiar with that. But the reason that made sense to me was a couple of moves that Marvel has made in recent films. So the first move, obviously, the biggest one, is that the Fox universe exists in the fabric of the MCU multiverse. So you have Hugh Jackman's Wolverine is back in that Fox universe. It's a variant of Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, but he lives in that universe again with Deadpool and presumably, other members of the X-Men. And then obviously we had the end credit scene of the Marvels where Kelsey Grammer's Beast appears at the end of the film and says that he needs to talk to Charles, and they use the Fox. Something that you'll notice is when mutants or other X-Men related things have been mentioned in the MCU proper, they use the X-Men 97 theme. The they when in this particular scene, what was notable about it is they used the X-Men movies theme. So they were clearly pointing towards the fact that this universe that Monica Rambeau landed in is the Fox X-Men universe, is a version of the Fox X-Men universe. It's the MCU's take on it, if you will. And so what I think is going to happen is I think there's going to be some sort of universal collision of the MCU and the Fox universe. And I think what would be really interesting, and this is a thought that I had, is Doctor Doom kind of pits them against each other because they're having an incursion, they're colliding, right? But there's little hints that the incursion is working differently than like we've seen in the past. And what Beast and any number, Reed Richards could do it, or Mark Ruffalo's Hulk could do it, Bruce Banner, but what they discover independently from each other and then come together on is that the universes aren't actually colliding with each other, and it's not a fight to the death of which universe will survive. They're actually reuniting. They're supposed to be one universe. The X-Men are supposed to exist in the MCU with the Avengers. and something ripped this universe apart. And Evan, you would have more knowledge of what that would be. I don't know if that would be Doctor Doom, but something has ripped these universes apart. And of course, I think it's pretty common knowledge that the Fantastic Four are people out of their universe. Like they're from the MCU proper, actually, and they got trapped in that retro futuristic world and they're trying to escape. Maybe that's a spoiler, but that's kind of the rumor that's going around. So they come back, and the whole thing of Avengers Doomsday is them coming together and realizing, oh my gosh, we're actually supposed to be one world and we're fighting each other. And the real enemy is Doom.
Yeah.
Doom is like splitting us apart. And then it being revealed that Doctor Doom, Victor Von Doom, is not actually Victor Von Doom. He's actually the variant from the other universe, from the Fox universe of Tony Stark. And he had a dark history that led him to become a version of Victor Von Doom as well. And he's the one half part in a way that you could illustrate this. Sorry, I know I'm getting like super nerdy and granular, but I like think about these things. I think of myself as a bit of a storyteller. I don't know if I'm a very good one, but
I'm the same.
yeah, but one of the things that I thought of was like, okay, a way that you could illustrate it is MJ in the MCU is Michelle Jones, right? Michelle Jones Watson, it's revealed in Spider-Man No Way Home. Well, Beast could reveal that in their universe, she exists as well. She's Mary Jane Watson, and that's actually who she's supposed to be. But the two halves of her exist in these different realities, and they need to be combined into one person. So the Tony Stark, we didn't really see the super dark elements of Tony Stark's character in the MCU. In the MCU, he struggles with substance, or excuse me, in the comics, he struggles with substance abuse and has kind of a dark side to him that we didn't fully get to see. And so maybe this is the dark side elements of Tony Stark. And Peter obviously was mentored by Tony Stark. And so I was thinking maybe in the film he has a moment of going, I know that there's like taking a page from Star Wars, I know that there's good in Tony, and I can convince him that like he doesn't have to do this and he's being manipulated by the real Victor Von Doom, who we find out is like Mads Mikkelsen or something. Well, Mads Mikkelsen's already been a character in the MCU, but you catch my drift. So that's my kind of theory. And then my other theory is, we might see other halves of dead Avengers like Steve Rogers and Natasha Romanoff that are indifferent, that maybe didn't become heroes or whatever, but are halves of themselves. And it's a way to bring Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson back for the grand finale. But I don't know. What do you think about that theory of it being kind of like an Avengers versus X-Men movie?
I feel like it's too unique and interesting of a theory for Marvel to actually do it, because they have to
Yeah.
play. They do everything way too safe.
Yep, true.
I think your average viewer is dumb. No offense.
Yep,
And
yep,
I think that they would probably get confused and be like, "Wait, what?" And I think they're already
yep,
going to get confused, no matter how clean or how simple or how boring you do it.
yep.
So, yeah, I like it. I think it's awesome. That's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Marvel is so formulaic at this point. They do everything so safe that I just don't imagine that would be something they would
It's
do.
probably going to be Fantastic Four coming back to the timeline and them facing off against Doom with some of the Avengers. So that's probably what's going to happen. But Spider-Man 4 is also scheduled to come out in July of 2026. So Avengers Doomsday we have in May, and then in July we have Spider-Man 4. So that is a release date for July of 2026. I thought it was unconfirmed, but it is confirmed. Sony has it on their calendar. The rumors right now are Spider-Man will have a new love interest, so we could talk about that. Interesting, considering that Zendaya and Tom Holland are dating in real life. And so my question for you, just overall, Evan, this is going to come out between Doomsday and Secret Wars. What do you expect out of this film?
So, I think it's actually really interesting. I think it's one of the more interesting thoughts or situations in the MCU right now.
Mm-hmm.
Not to rant, I'll try and make this as concise as possible. At the end of No Way Home, one of my favorite things the MCU's done happened. Whereas you're normally used to the origin of story of Spider-Man being that Uncle Ben dies,
Hmm.
etc. This trilogy of Spider-Man movies in the MCU did a very, very interesting and I was a huge fan on the take on how of his origin story, where his origin story wasn't one movie; it was three movies, right?
Hmm.
And there was an
Hmm.
entire
Hmm.
arc of like, throughout the movies where they were like, why is Spider-Man getting all this Iron Man tech? Tony Stark's helping him out. Like, we just want a street level hero. This is too
Hmm.
much. Like, he's already going to space. A lot of like true Spider-Man fans are like, we love the stories. The MCU has been great, but like, God, I wish we could get that version of Spidey. And then at
Hmm.
the end of No Way Home, everyone forgets who he is. Everyone
Hmm.
forgets his identity. He has to enroll in a GED program because he can't get into college anymore because no one knows who he is. He
Hmm.
he gets a tiny little apartment, and he really becomes the Spider-Man that we know and love, which is a broke young kid living in New York
Yeah.
that's doing it all on his own. He has a sewing machine to make his costume, and then he goes out in the middle of winter and he starts swinging away to go fight crime.
Hmm.
So I think because of that, a lot of fans, including myself, were like, good, we're finally going to get the street level version of Spider Man.
Hmm.
Sony is Sony. And Sony
Yeah.
was like, nah, we just made so much money off of No Way Home, having Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire in the movie. We want to do our own multiverse movie. And there was a lot of rumors about how they wanted to continue that and how I would imagine Marvel and Kevin Feige were like, no, like that's not it's not what we need to do right now. Like you're like
Yeah.
I think what they don't understand, or maybe they're desperate to make money when the reality is like you will make $1 billion if you make a good Spider-Man movie. It
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
it doesn't have to be multiversal, blah 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 blah. And hey, guess what? You're gonna save a lot of money by not having to pay all those actors. So wait till
Yep.
Secret Wars. But I think that was a big issue, right? And I think a lot of people were kind of worried about that. But and this is my own theory. There's an animated show that we'll have probably an entire episode or more on called
Yep.
Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man that just recently came out on Disney Plus, and it is 10 out of 10. It is exactly one of my favorite pieces of Spider-Man anything that I've watched in a very long time, and it does a very good job of him being a street level hero fighting his rogues gallery, like Scorpion and Doc Ock and all these different things. Like it does such a perfect job. And I wonder if that story is kind of getting them to be like, see, we told you, this is what people want. So the rumors have now been coming that they're going to change the story again, which they had been going back and forth about it being a street level movie or it being a multiversal, war saga, whatever.
Yep.
I do hope that it is that. I hope they go to a more street level story and they give us the chance for Tom Holland's Spider-Man to be the broke Spider-Man that we all know and love.
Yeah, absolutely. I also like I agree with you 100%. I think that I would way rather see a street level movie at this point instead of this big cosmic superhero movie. We've seen Tom Holland do that a million times at this point. We haven't seen him play Spider-Man as the traditional Spider-Man, the Spider-Man that we all know and love, that I personally grew up with watching Spider-Man the animated series, etc. There's some really cool things going on in the street level Marvel universe too. Vincent D'Onofrio, who plays Kingpin in Daredevil, has said he would love to be in a Spider-Man movie.
Well, and they're also about to come out with a Daredevil TV show for the first time in the MCU.
Yeah,
The stage is set, and like to Sony's requests and wants, you can still have a Spider-Man movie that's street level with Daredevil in it, which people will go
yeah.
absolutely
Oh,
nuts about.
that's such a like that pairing is so good too. It works in the Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. It was great in Spider-Man the animated series. It's great in the comics. Absolutely. Like bring Charlie Cox in, you
Don't
know?
get me wrong, though. I do desperately need more Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man movies. Somehow, some
Yeah.
way down the road. I don't know how you do it. I would need that so badly. So
Mhm.
I want that, but we know what Spider-Man needs to be.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and maybe Andrew Garfield will have an opportunity to play Spider-Man again in Secret Wars. So, yeah, there's definite opportunity there. But yeah, I think you and I are on the same page there. Go with the street level story. Give Peter, Peter's going to eventually find his way back to MJ, but, he's going to have a different love interest. With a street level story with the love interest, there's an opportunity to bring Felicia Hardy in. There's an opportunity to bring some other characters that Peter's dated as well throughout comic book lore. What do you think about that? What do you think about a new love interest for Peter and Spidey?
I mean, yeah, you got to get Felicity in, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to.
Mm-hmm.
Black Cat,
Mm.
absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, I listen. I like the take on MJ being a different MJ in the MCU. Um, I think they'll have the opportunity to bring her back down the line, but this will be a great opportunity to bring in, the Black Cat, and it'll probably be Anya Taylor-Joy
Mm-hmm.
just because she's in everything, and she'd probably be great in that role. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's something that we can enjoy, and it's part of the story, right? Everyone just forgot
Yeah.
who he was, anyways.
I also think there's an opportunity. Look, Willem Dafoe obviously was in No Way Home and played Norman Osborn, but I think there's an opportunity potentially here to bring in Harry Osborn. Osborn's a common name. Peter doesn't have to know that they're connected, and obviously Oscorp is not a prolific company in the MCU in the way that it is in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man universe or the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man universe. So I think you could bring in Andrew Garfield. You could bring in Harry Osborn into the MCU to play one of his friends, as a supporting character as well, and see that dynamic between Peter and Harry potentially.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's a lot of good ways to go about it for sure.
And there's not, I know we just mentioned big superhero, cosmic superhero we wouldn't love to see, but I mean, Fantastic Four's coming out. I don't know how they get back to the MCU proper, but maybe Johnny Storm could be Peter's friend. Who knows? But there's a lot of opportunity there as well. So we have Secret Wars left as far as the films to talk about that are coming out. So I know we are running up. We've been talking a while here, Evan. So I don't know how much in depth you want to go about Secret Wars, but I'll leave it up to you. As far as how much I know, you've already talked a little bit about it as well, and the stories. But anything else you want to bring up about Secret Wars as far as how it goes?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing that I think is most relevant is I do think that it's great that like Deadpool and Wolverine was able to bring the X-Men Fox characters into this universe. And I did
Mm-hmm.
think they did a great job there. I do think that, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, like they got brought in a way that makes sense. But I do still feel that they're very different universes. So the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
idea of a battle world where again, in Secret Wars, all the different universes, little pieces of their Earth gets
Mm-hmm.
pushed together into one Earth. So you
Mm-hmm.
have, essentially like the Hulk has a piece of land that was from his universe that he's in charge of, like kind of like a mob boss at this point. Or,
Mm-hmm.
Panther has from one universe their version of Wakanda there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that would be a really good approach to
Mm-hmm.
how you can have these different universes be in the movie, but still be distinguished and have their own world and their own, thing where you can go back and forth and you can have like, say, Tobey Maguire in the Fox world with like the X-Men say, but it's separated and visually you can understand it because they all have their different part of the planet. So thematically I think that makes a lot of sense and would be a good way to keep things organized, because once you start to bring all of this together it might be weird, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, I'm not as familiar with the Secret Wars story as you are, but I know that there's a lot there. I know that there's a rumor of a multiverse Avengers as well. So like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, some other characters from, maybe Chris Evans
Yeah,
is Johnny Storm again,
I
you
do
know?
think I think that'll just be a natural progression of what we're talking about already, where that is on the world.
Mm-hmm.
They'll all be fighting against each other and they'll slowly be like, we got to work together. I think we need that. I think we need I begrudgingly accept that we will have to have Tobey Maguire lead it, but he is such a bad actor nowadays, or at least he
Yeah,
was in No Way Home. I hope
yeah,
he can like learn to act with some personality if he does do that, because
yeah.
that like reluctant like ho hum, oh I'm just a guy is not what we want out of Spider-Man, and I can't believe that he tried to bring that in No Way Home. Either way,
I gotta tell you, I'm not the biggest fan of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man.
he was awful.
I've never. I mean, I think that those movies work. The first two in particular work in spite of him. I think that he's way too nerdy to be Spider-Man. Spider-Man's a nerd, but he's not that kind of a nerd. Like he's Andrew Garfield kind of captured that better, I think, and Tom Holland's captured that better than Tobey Maguire has. And I know I have some Spider-Man fans, shout out the Carusos of Vigilante 1939 pod, who will like be horrified to hear that. But yeah, I've never been a big fan of Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. I'm gonna be really honest. I much prefer Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland in that role.
Yeah, I mean, like especially like in No Way Home when Andrew Garfield's talking about how he lost, he's like, I lost Gwen, my
Yeah,
she was my MJ, right? Like
yep,
the way he talked about it was so great and so like
yep,
heartful. And then Toby Maguire's like, the night Ben died, I hunted down the man who I thought did it. I wanted him
yeah,
dead. I got what I wanted. It didn't. It's like, how do you fall? I don't know. So either way,
yeah.
but I do think we will see that, and I think that would be great, right? To have Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, to have Chris Evans as Captain America, to have Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, right? Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the idea of all of them rushing into battle. Oh my
Yep.
God. You know, people
I
talk
know.
about how no one will ever like replicate Endgame, but if they do that right, it will be as big.
Oh yeah, it's going to be really cool, and I think, like we've alluded to, it's probably going to be a form of grand finale, whether it's a soft reboot or a hard reboot. It's probably going to be the end, so they're probably going to want everybody there. So it should be good, man. I'm really looking forward to this next season of Marvel films. Obviously, we have Beyond Secret Wars as well. We have an X-Men reboot on the horizon. I think we need to do a full show on that, though, separate from this, because the X-Men are pretty awesome, cool group of characters. I'm excited for Gen Z and Gen Alpha because I think with us growing up, X-Men was always cooler than Avengers. Would you agree? Like, I always thought the X-Men were like cooler in the animated series days, than the Avengers were.
I mean, the X-Men again, it just comes down to they had better shows, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
X-Men animated series is one of the great comic book, pieces of media ever. And I
yeah.
think The Amazing Spider-Man was really, really good too. And like The Amazing Spider-Man did a really good job of like they did Secret Wars in that too. They had
Mm-hmm.
Captain America, the man, without time. Like they did a good job of bringing in Captain America and Iron Man and all those things, but it was nearly not at the level of which X-Men was. And
Yeah.
so I think just naturally, I think you were more interested in those stories. I'll never forget being a kid and watching X-Men as a very young kid, and it was like to be continued, and I was like, what does to be continued mean?
Yeah.
I couldn't wrap my head. It was like the first time, but like that was the level of like interest that I had in the X-Men was just like it was so captivating. So I totally agree. There's so much there to dig into.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We should do a full show on X-Men. But what's interesting to me is beyond Secret Wars, like when we were growing up, the big Marvel character franchises were Spider-Man, X-Men, Fantastic Four before the MCU. And maybe you could throw Incredible Hulk in there too, like as things that people thought of. And what's interesting to me is that since Iron Man and the Avengers and Captain America and Thor have become the MCU basically is come to the forefront. Those have become the big Marvel franchises, and Spider-Man hasn't taken a backseat, but X-Men and Fantastic Four certainly have taken a backseat.
Yeah.
And what's interesting to me is beyond Secret Wars, I think that the big Marvel franchises are again going to be the big Marvel franchises of the 90s. Spider-Man, X-Men, Fantastic Four. They're going to kind of be the big things that lead the way for Marvel. And then we might get new versions of the Avengers characters
I
down the
will,
line.
I will say this to your point. everyone knows that, everyone that watched X-Men 97
Hmm.
understands that, like, you can't portray the X-Men in a better fashion. X-Men 97 was
Yes.
like perfect television, 10 out of
Yep.
10 as well. Really, it was so well done, and it gave you a great like look at like how powerful they are, all the cool stuff they can do, really good relationship building, all of the above. So I think they've like made fans, we're ready for the X-Men, right? And just
Hmm.
like I mentioned, right, the your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man has done a great job of re-entering, Spider-Man into this like street level hero that we all love, and it did a great job of story building and world building within that. And I think it's going to prepare us for this next iteration. And I know this is more about movies, comics, and things like that, but like to anyone that's playing Marvel Rivals right now on PC or Xbox or whatever, it's like kind of like an Overwatch clone for people that are gamers.
Hmm.
Rivals is probably the biggest video game in the world right now. It's like taking the world by storm. It's a fun game. I play it way too much, but one thing that I really love about it is there's millions of people playing this game, and they do such a good job at showcasing the characters. Like
Hmm.
being able to play with the Hulk or Captain America, like it's cool and all, but like they do a really good job of like character design. So like how they
Hmm.
look, the little interactions the characters have between each other. Like Namor, just like, or excuse me, no more, completely obsessed over the Invisible Woman, or like Hulk not liking the Thing, right? They do a really good job in this game of specifically they like their whole focus of the show right now, or the game right now, is like introducing the Fantastic Four. So they just
Hmm.
introduced Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman. Now it's going to be Johnny Storm and the Thing next. And like they're doing a very good job of showing all the people that are playing this game, which is massive, what the
Hmm.
Fantastic Four are like. So that was like the longest way ever of like getting to the point that I'm making, which is like you said, Spider-Man, X-Men, and Fantastic Four are being so well done in introducing a lot of new people to
Yep.
these characters, so that when there is time to come out, in the MCU, like these movies are about to come out, it's going to make it even better. Like people are going to be really excited for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and that's a great place for us to end. Um, so next week, Evan, I know we want to talk about your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and we definitely should, but I do think we should do a DC episode next week.
I agree. I don't think we need a whole episode to talk about your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man either. So maybe we could do X-Men 97 and that and all those things together.
All the animated stuff coming out of Marvel so far. We'll do that in a couple of weeks, but I think next week we'll discuss Creature Commandos, we'll discuss the DCU, the slate that James Gunn announced, the development on those films, some of the casting that's come out, the Superman trailer. We will discuss it. Stuff going on with the Batman Part 2, which is insane, but really cool. Excited for that. Yeah, we'll talk all about DC next week, so make sure you tune in.
How did you
Thanks.
not say Superman one time?
Did I not say Superman? I said the trailer for Superman, didn't
Well,
I?
yeah, but like Josh, it's like a very big Superman fan. He's very excited about Superman.
There is a Superman movie coming out in July. It looks incredible. We are eating well in July, guys. Jurassic World looks like it's going to be the first Jurassic Park to be good since the 1993
1997.
film.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have Superman coming out a couple of weeks later, which looks incredible. James Gunn doing Superman. Cannot emphasize enough. And then we have Fantastic Four coming out at the end of the month. We are going to eat well in July. It's going to be great. So we'll discuss Superman, what we thought of the trailer, and what we think of everything we've seen so far of the film. But yeah, until then, we'll leave it there.
Super secret headquarters out.
Yeah.